Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Safranis, and today we're on with Mark Budzinski. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me on today. Yeah, I'm a kind of a data guy. I've been in and around analytics my whole career, and with the hype machine that's hard to miss nowadays with AI, whether you're a stockholder in something like Nvidia or just turn on the television generally, right? So AI and where we're going with potentially how to leverage data, that's my wheelhouse. That's where I've been my whole career. And in present day, manage a company with a couple of partners called Clean Data, where we essentially help clients in that whole world, right? So what to do and how to do it, that classic advisory services is our shtick.
Interesting. So, what are some of the common challenges that businesses have with their marketing data?
That's a great, how should I say, simple question with a lot of threads to it, right? So marketing data comes in a couple of forms, and it goes back to the root of the almost like the raison d'etre, like what is marketing there for? And it's a simple question, but I think it's oftentimes overlooked as we get into sort of the firefight of day-to-day business. So there's an opportunity to do brand development and brand creation. So there's lots of analytics around. So how are we doing? How many clicks per second did I get on a particular social media, or how many eyeballs did I get at a particular stream or whatever? So there's a concept of, are we getting through to people, which I would argue is interesting, but insufficient, right? And why is it insufficient? Because it's loosely related to the operations of the business, right? A business is in business to acquire customers, retain customers, upsell to those customers, ultimately to grow their revenue, margin, etc. So the fact that I've got a lot of likes out there on a particular stream, okay, helpful, but not necessarily directly related. And Alex, I find a similar concept when it comes to the classic world that marketing typically owns, called demand creation, right? So if we're trying to create leads, quote unquote, for our sales organization or our sales machine, whatever it is, could be direct or indirect channels, whatever, there's this ongoing challenge to say, all right, are the leads that we're generating well qualified? Are they in the right target with the right problem set? And can they, like the branding question, can they ultimately turn into real business, right? So again, we have a set of metrics associated with demand creation. How many leads did I generate from that particular event or that particular campaign? And to me, again, it's interesting, it's helpful to generate leads, but unless they can be turned into successful sales opportunities that ultimately close, doesn't really matter how many they get. Part of our advisory is in this world. I would say a good chunk of it is in this world where marketing staff is frustrated because they're like, we're hitting our KPRs, OKRs, we're doing everything we're supposed to do. What's the problem? Why is business down? Why are we losing more customers than we otherwise should? Why is the CEO in my face that marketing's not doing a good enough job, when look at all these metrics, we are doing a good job? And I think that's the root of it, right? So how do you connect the marketing affairs to ultimately the real effect on the business?
Yeah, and that's all attribution. So, how do you work with attribution in your business?
Essentially, there has to be a high level conversation that is meaningful, that is honest across functions in an organization, right? So what I have done in my own companies, and certainly the way we consult with the ones today, have to do with real honest and goodness business goals that are clearly stated, right? So is it about market share? Is it about targeting a new market? Is it about uptick of a new product? Is it about customer retention? Where are the magic knobs in the business? And then make sure that the marketing analytics are, number one, connected to those. But number two, if you think about marketing from the beginning to the end of sales, right? So from when a brand is created all the way through a deal is closed, that whole sales marketing continuum, the more contiguous that can be, the more straightforward that can be, the more bidirectional that can be in terms of the communication flow, the better shot we've got at actually achieving those business goals, right? I think the danger and the trap, maybe is a better word, that companies get into is this classic silo thing where technology is cranking along because everybody wants to get to the cloud, everybody wants to get to machine learning, right? So you have these sort of narrow technology-based objectives, and I think it's very easy to lose sight with, hang on, the business runs by definition cross-functionally. So how are we making sure that, as you call it, the attribution is taking shape in an appropriate way towards something meaningful?
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think the future of data processing will look like in marketing?
Yeah, hopefully more of what I just said, for sure. But I think if you get specific about that, and again, the cheeky term that's thrown around way too often is AI, and under that are these algorithms that are termed machine learning. So if we think about marketing trying to not only understand the effect that we're having on our target market relative to things like upsell, market basket, and things like that, but can we actually bend the future, right? So rather than just understanding this is where we are and let's hypothesize about how to make this better, or let's run experiments in somehow making this better, which is where we've been historically, can the computer help us, right? Where are the patterns? And something we can all get our heads around. I mentioned market basket. You just think about a simple supermarket example, right? So if the patron is buying diapers and organic peanut butter and fresh vegetables, the correlation to buy fresh fruit is probably pretty high, right? You can get your head around that intuitively. But a lot of things are non-intuitive in terms of where correlations are. And then the magic opportunity, the magic question, is there any sense of causation? So if we can bundle things, if we can have loss leaders associated with things that are connected to other products that are more interesting for us long term, right? Old concepts, if you will, but applied in a much more robust form, right? The computer can help us. So what is machine learning? Let's break the mystique. The machine learning is no different than human learning, just at a rate that's wildly accelerated. So if you've been in and around marketing data analysts in your career, right, you understand the pivot tables and the spreadsheets trying to deduce conclusions about what's going on. And then again, we try to run experiments about the future. The computer can do that more reliably and obviously more quickly so that we can get on about those educated guesses and experiments. And I use the word experiment because unfortunately, machine learning and AI is not about with certainty predicting the future. It's not pixie dust, right? In the sense that if we only just do this, we're guaranteed that we're going to have success. Not quite. But the probabilities do start to go in your favor to the extent that the models can be quote unquote trained. And that's another term out of the industry where the computer gets smarter over time. The more data it sees, the more mistakes it makes, the more opportunities that actually do correlate, the smarter those algorithms get. My favorite three fundamental ideas of a business: customer acquisition, customer retention, and customer upsell, the ability to get more revenue from those customers that we already have. Each in of themselves distinct, each in of themselves has a play relative to marketing. But I think when you ask the question, where is it going in the future? The opportunity to bend the future to our liking as a firm, again, not guaranteed, it's not pixie dust, but to a much higher degree of success.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think we'll ever get there?
It's one of those, if you remember your 11th grade math, right, where you have these curves that are asymptotes. So you're asymptotic to a particular line. Let's call that line perfection. You never get there. But I think we're going to get a lot closer, right? So instead of the step function over time, gosh, historically, we've been so dependent on largely the people that have been driving tools made for people. And so you have a couple of constraints there. How good is the tool and how good are the people? Right. So the fact that you can condense those things into machine learning algorithms and essentially reduce risk, reduce time, improve probabilities. And again, as the machine learning algorithm gets better. But no, I don't think we never get to certainty. We never get to let's just all go on the beach and the business runs itself, which in and of itself is comforting to me, right? The idea that AI in the sci-fi movies just takes over the world and we all have nothing to do, that sort of dystopic future state, I have a hard time getting my head around anytime soon, right? You still need people. Again, the machine learning algorithms have to be driven, have to be monitored, have to be ultimately tweaked, have to be implemented by people. So the fact that we have more powerful tools, right? So think of the construction crews that were building houses 200 years ago with axes, and then we got saws and hammers and nails, and now we have power tools. Yeah, now we've got some AI. I don't know if you've seen videos of some of the construction things now, where roofs are getting laid on bit by bit with these smart construction pieces of equipment. It's pretty cool, right? Obviously, robotics in factories making automobiles and all kinds of things. The question is, are we going to get there? It depends how you define there. But if there is like a sense of like we're done, nah, I don't see it.
Yeah, I've been exploring this concept recently of autonomous marketing, similar to how cars have become autonomous in the sense that it started completely manual, then it became assisted, where you get warning lights, it gives you sensors and stuff. And I think we're in that phase. And then full autonomy is when the car's taking all those inputs and making the decisions for us. I think that with driving, there's just more opportunity. There's more business opportunity at the moment, and I think that's why it evolved first. Cars have been around for probably a similar amount of time to marketing, but I just think that there's a bigger consumer market for it, which is why it evolved faster. But don't you think we're moving towards fully autonomous marketing?
Moving towards, again, I'll give it to you, to actually be in a state where we have autonomous marketing. I think of driving, as complex as it is still a relatively linear, straight line algorithm to deduce, right? So I'm going the next distance, what's around me. There's the variables are straight. When you think about a company and the variables, some of them hardwired like that for sure, but so many of them that are soft, right? And so that has to do with evolving strategy. If there's an acquisition that happens, another company goes out of business, there's just variables. Private equity takes on another thread that changes the dynamics of how companies operate, right? The level of investment that goes into them. These are all things that I don't think, it's hard to imagine just this autonomous beast somehow takes it all in and gets it all right. Now, again, if you think some of the mechanical things of marketing having to do with analogous to your car example, yeah, more autonomous for sure, right? When we think of Gen AI as an example, and I can't tell you the number of clients I have right now that are asking me at Clean Data and my colleagues, we got to get going with Gen AI. Our executives are all over us. Right? We need one of them Gen AI thingies. But what do we do? What is the use case, is the cheeky term that's used, right? What do we actually do to take advantage of this? Do we somehow better monitor the way that we're interacting with customers proactively? Yeah, maybe, right? You think about a lot of the marketing material that can be created. You can go into ChatGPT right now and say, whip me up a survey that I can ask my customers relative to satisfaction on this particular dimension, and in 5 seconds the thing comes back. So there are definitely opportunities to improve, and some of these things that are a little more mechanical, like your car thing. But man, I think the art form of marketing, and you'd be hard pressed to find a marketing executive that says, no, it's not art, it's all science. Because to the extent it is all science, and maybe it is more like the car, Alex, your hypothesis might be true in terms of maybe what your other guests are telling you. I hold back a bit from that. I think we're heading in the direction, but I think of it as a tool that's more sophisticated, as opposed to a handover to Waymo, whatever that company is that picks you up in Phoenix with no driver. I don't think a marketing department is just going to operate with no driver. That's hard to contemplate.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're drawing some really good parallels, and I want to stay on this because it's particularly interesting. I think you have a good perspective on it. Waymo is not fully autonomous. It is monitored by humans. So it doesn't just operate autonomously without supervision. It makes decisions autonomously, but if there's something that it's unsure about or it gets in a sticky situation, a human driver is there to take over. And I think that's what it would look like in the early stages, that there's this monitoring of performance and activity for that particular reason. It's so that we can look for the edge cases, right? That's where it all falls apart, is the edge cases, when something new happens. Like you said, the private equity firm takes over and the system doesn't know how to respond to it. But I wanted to zoom in on one particular thing you said, which is it's hard for the machine to get it all right. And I would argue that nobody gets it all right. People don't get it all right. Apple, one of the best marketed companies on earth, probably the best marketed company on earth, recently had a humongous PR disaster from an ad they put out. If you've seen, I'm not sure if you've seen the squishing ad. So they took all of these creative tools, instruments, art, and they put it in a hydraulic press and they squished it. And when they pulled the press back up, there was an iPad. And so it's trying to say we put all of this creativity into the device. And they went viral because of how tone deaf it was to artists who don't like the idea of all of this authentic analog art instruments being digitized and miniaturized. And it just shows that there is no getting it all right. And it's all experimentation and feedback loops. And even the best agency and the best marketed company on earth can make humongous mistakes. So I would argue that's not really a fair way to judge an AI versus a person. I think the moral side of it is a lot more concrete and difficult to dispute. But from the performance side, I have trouble seeing an autonomous future marketing machine being less effective than humans.
Yeah, and that's a point of view that's a avocados versus oranges kind of thing, right? I'm not sure we arm wrestle that to the ground and come to a clear consensus where you convince me or I convince you, as much as to say, you go back to your car example where you have this monitoring. It's really ironic. I have some friends just a couple of weeks ago that got in the car and they got stuck at a red light and the car wouldn't go. Now, why? Because we're in the autumn season and there was a leaf that was hanging down in front of the green light and the car couldn't see the green light. So it was just stuck there. Now, where in all of this would the car have figured that out? The person that's responsible for making sure that the algorithm takes that data point into consideration. It's, I think you said edge case, right? These are things that you just can't forecast. So I'm just a believer, and just call it nostalgic, right? As I've been doing this my whole career, with tools at my side that have gotten better and better, right? So it's an easy paradigm for me to think about ML and AI generally, ChatGPT as an example, and Gen AI as a tool. But I'm still very much driving the success, right? So can you imagine the CEO, who presumably is not a robot, a real person, comes to the board meeting and says, yeah, revenue's down, but the marketing machine says everything's going well in marketing. Hang on, where's the give and take with that, right? Where's this continuum developed, right? So if you're saying at some point the entire business can be built into this autonomous beast, right? That's, now you're getting sci-fi on me. But if you're saying there are silos that could be put into that position, again, I wouldn't arm wrestle with you to the death. That's not possible. But it's by definition only going to see what it sees, right? So where are those constraints? Where are those limits? And I just have greater faith in people, particularly as you get on in your career. You're a good communicator. You can deduce things. You can conclude things. You can question things. You can read things. So call that intuition if you want. But there's a lot to that in successful management of a company. So to the extent it can just be programmed, yeah, it's as a help. Yeah, but I guess fall short of agreeing with you with that last mile.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. We're far behind cars. Marketing is far behind cars in terms of technological, I would say. We have just started to enter the era of complex data processing, big data. And we've been doing it for 10 years. That's not a long time. And cars have probably been doing it for slightly longer, but not that much longer. I think the difference is the economic incentive. But I think we're behind. And we see the trouble with cars, just because it's an easy example, the trouble is it doesn't have that full contextual awareness of the data. And we have the same problem in marketing with people. The leaf covering the green light for the car is something like us not understanding how impactful an ad is on brand awareness, because brand awareness is a notoriously difficult thing to measure and see. Is our brand awareness going up? Is it going down? How do we act based on it? There's a lot of blind spots in marketing both on the human side and on the machine learning side, because of course there's a lot of machine learning already in marketing, and there's a lot of blind spots which are caused by all sorts of things, including fraud, ad fraud. So there's lots of fake data, there's lots of fake clicks, and those are all being optimized on, unless the
Yeah,
system roots them out.
that's a scary world, isn't it? When you start talking about fraud and just made up stuff, that's wow. That's got nothing to do, as you suggest, with performance. That is the moral compass of where our civilization is going and how easy it is to be tricked, right? Marketing has always been somewhere on the slippery slope of manipulation, right? So let's be honest about that. But to be blatantly lying, man, we see it in all kinds of politics is the obvious example, but it's in all kinds of markets where, yeah, it's just downright scary. And I think if you overlay that with something we haven't talked about yet, which is the whole concept of data privacy, my data, the obvious example, don't steal Sting's song and play it like it's your song. There's that kind of stuff. But what's been tried to be regulated with things like GDPR over the last 10 years, HIPAA data, even longer than that, these things are just getting more intense, right? They're getting harder because as data is required for machine learning or human learning for that matter, by definition, we're starting to look at sensitive data, right? So no, we'll just redact that, right? We won't have the person's social security number. We'll redact that. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, right? As the systems actually take shape. To me, there's a privacy issue that is really difficult. And then this whole fraudulent thing that you raise, these are, oh my God, these are massive issues as we go forward.
Do you think that ad fraud and traffic fraud will decrease over time as maybe ML models can identify it better?
Yes, but this is a little bit like cybersecurity, right? For every win where we stamp out a problem, the bad guys are smarter. And you see this in terrorism, right? Why do we take our shoes off when we go to the airport? Because somebody figured out the shoe bomber guy, and now here we are. Hasn't been a shoe bomber since, but it's changed the way everybody travels around the world, right? So I think it's the same. It's the same notion. This is almost like a moral philosophy kind of an argument or a point of view, which is, are there more bad guys than good? I don't think so. So I think as long as there's enough that are paying attention, and there's money to be made here, clearly, when you think about CrowdStrike and these others that are dealing with security today, big companies trading at high valuations on the stock exchange, I think we're going to see the same sort of thing develop here when it comes to data privacy. There are some today. Obviously, to me, this is an emerging market, if you will. It's not as mature as something like cybersecurity, but it'll get there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to think about how that would work, how ad fraud would work in the future. I'm very curious about that.
Maybe you're one of those bad guys, Alex. Maybe you're.
You got to think like them, right? Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know what the future holds in terms of data privacy. I've had this long-standing opinion on data privacy that it's actually not in the interest of the individual. Data privacy is in the interest of walled gardens who refuse to share that data with the broader ecosystem under the guise of privacy, protection, but really because they want to protect their most valuable asset, which is data.
I don't disagree with that. I can't come to your dinner party. I have other plans. I'm not feeling well. Oh, the kids have got a cold. I can't come. The fact is, you don't want to go to the dinner party. So it's that kind of thing. There are self-interests and there are organizational interests that supersede this, and it becomes a very convenient scapegoat to say, oh no, we couldn't do that, the data, we would expose it and that wouldn't be right to the individual, right? I'm personally, as I just think of myself as a citizen of the world, where people say, that Google, even when your computer's off, it's tracking how many hours of REM sleep you get at night, and it's tracking when you go to coffee, did you get sugar or did you not get sugar in your coffee? I don't care. I personally, if it makes the world better to put me in an anonymous place, adding up with all the other citizens to collect some data about behavior, and ultimately they're trying to sell me something, so I get an ad for coffee that shows up in my computer because of that, it doesn't bother me. I know people get really upset about that, the big brother, I'm being stalked thing. It's personal, right? So I don't mean to say there's a right and a wrong, but from my point of view, just as a citizen of the world, I really could give two hoots if Google is keeping track of where I go. If ultimately my phone's being, think about the real dystopian thing, my phone's being bugged. So the government's listening to me talk to you on this podcast right now. I don't care. I don't have anything to worry about. But I think that might be a unique point of view. There's a lot of people that are like, whoa, other people trying to monitor my behavior, sneak around, watch me and listen to me. That's not with my permission. And that might be what you're saying, Alex, where that gets bundled up with, no, we can't give this data away because we're going to offend people.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. There's a few ways to look at it. First, for us as marketers, we have no choice but to be open to it because it would be so hypocritical to be anti personal data as a marketer when our entire career, livelihood, is based off of collecting and processing other people's data. So who would we be to say, oh no, we would never give our data? It's pick a side. If you're against this stuff, don't be in marketing. And I think that, and on the other hand, it's important to be responsible with data as well. And to say, if you don't like it, then get in there and change something. Go in there and work on data privacy protection, work on being a responsible marketer or being a data consultant like yourself and helping businesses responsibly manage data. I don't think the solution is to, like I hear a lot of the time, just complain about it. Yeah, nobody wants the data to be misused. In my personal opinion, I think the answer is to go down with the ship. If they're going to take our private conversations and incriminate us and lock us up, I'm going down with the ship. I've told my friends I'm going to have the lowest social credit score of anybody. I already have the lowest Uber score of all my friends. And the reason is because I'm not afraid to speak my mind, and I think a lot of people might not like that. And I think the Uber score is a way for them to show their opinion without saying anything. And I think that's okay. I think that's how it should be. That if there's going to be a system that's unjust, that I would rather be punished by it than to avoid it. There's more dignity in standing by and standing up for what you believe in. Like you and I both believe you should, even in the world where all of your data is collected, you should not be afraid. You should not limit what you say. Put your phone away. Always be concerned about the government. We should be in a world, we want to be in a world where even if there is monitoring going on, it is responsible monitoring that is not incriminating us for things that it shouldn't be.
And I agree with you emphatically, but I have a dear friend who grew up in Hong Kong. She's immigrated and lives here now, the West Coast, but a lot of her family is still in Hong Kong. And with the change in the way that the Chinese government and the Hong Kong community have evolved over the years, she doesn't feel that way, right? If she was on the phone right now, she would say, you guys are just damn lucky to be in a civilization. God bless America. But it's not just America. There's a lot of other aggregations of people, let's call them countries, that behave the same way, right? But man, if you are in one of those places, you're in Saudi Arabia, you're in Russia, you're in China, it's a little bit different. So I think the fact that we have the opportunity to be in a free country, in a free society, doing business around the world with other free countries to largely the same degree as the U.S., it's a real blessing, isn't it? It's a real advantage that we have. Now, once you take that as a given of your life algorithm, then I completely agree with you, right? Let's maximize our community. Let's maximize our ability to share each other, and by definition, that means data about each other, and there can be a greater good. So in that, is there some nefarious actor that can take advantage of that? Yeah, that's a lot of examples, right? Where it's there's a food line, and our intentions are to give food away to the poor on a Saturday morning, and the next thing, some teenagers come and steal food or whatever. There's always a nefarious actor in anything. So it is too easy to say, because of that negative, that we have to baby out with the bathwater. I just find that to be stupid. It's just ignorant. And speaking of ignorant, right, there are better ways to look after data. So again, you think about sensitive data in a hospital or something like that, right, as far as HIPAA compliance. You just can't even believe how people send email to each other that has an attached spreadsheet with all kinds of sensitive data in it. And then somebody says from the outside, oh, I'm looking for data on such and such that's unrelated to the sensitive data. But somebody internally goes, oh, yeah, I think I have a spreadsheet on that. And off it goes, right? You start behaving in a lazy form, right? Instead of going through proper encrypted channels and proper portals, all the things that have been set up to make this stuff secure, people get lazy. And that happens a lot more than the nefarious actors, in my judgment.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned HIPAA. I'm going to make an official prediction right now. You just sparked it. That in years, so that'll be 2040, about 2040, we will not have, HIPAA will not exist. And instead, there will be a new data standard, probably encryption based, for all data. Like HIPAA will be seen as less safe than whatever the next data standard is, and I think it'll just cover everything.
Oh, yeah, a very clever idea, and I think you're probably onto it because the medical community were ahead of their time declaring that their data was sensitive. Right, this is long before websites and GDPR and all that. So, I think what you're arguing, and I tend to agree with you, is there's going to be something bigger and richer that doesn't necessarily target the medical community. It targets some of these other issues that the HIPAA people go, oh, they've just gotten ahead of us. Why don't we just do it their way? I would say that's a likely scenario, and your time frame of 15 years is probably about right. But we should schedule the podcast right now to come back to the table in 15 years and see how right you are. But I think you're onto something there for sure. We see it in other walks of life, certainly.
Yeah, because you hear about HIPAA all the time, and that's been a thing for so long, and it almost doesn't fit. If you think about it, it seems a little bit odd, the whole concept. You would think in America, of all places, that data would be able to be used for advertising and targeting. We allow advertising on the TV for pharma, and nobody else does, but then we're like more protective of our data than anybody else. It's odd. It's at odds with what you would think in America we do with health information, as weird as that sounds. But we tend to be a very open country with regard to data. So I think
we see it in law too, don't we, with client privilege, right? So the bad guys admitted that they've done the crime, but because they've told their lawyer and the lawyer can't leak that, then they go through the charade of trying to defend the person in court. This, I've always said, why can't just truth prevail? Why can't just the right piece of information come to the head of the table? So again, if you go back to the HIPAA example, if I've been in and out of the hospital with something as trivial as a broken leg, something as dramatic as a near-death experience with cancer, do I personally, Mark, give two hoots? That's somehow in the public record and people know that? No. But yeah, it's a little bit like client privilege, right? So there's a doctor privilege with the patient, and there are a lot of people that don't feel the way I feel when it comes to, oh, we don't want to tell people I've had this particular ailment. It's something is going to be used against me, or there's just made up BS to a large degree. But your point that HIPAA is as old as donkey years is true, and we have a lot bigger issues as we go forward that are going to be addressed that make that look like old news for sure.
Yeah. So, I'm curious what will happen in the future. I think we will have, first of all, if I understand, what's this agency called? DARPA. If I understand DARPA correctly, they probably already have an AI that is whatever it's called, like that peak AI that's like self-aware and all of that, because they're like 20 years ahead of us in the private.
Well, they certainly were with the internet, right? They had the internet before we did. That's where it came from. So no doubt about it. That's where some of the leading intelligence of the world is right now.
That system would probably intake, I would imagine that in the future there'll be some kind of a repository of all human information into an AI. That seems like where it's going. Would you agree?
That's 50 plus years down the road. Come on. But maybe.
Yeah, it just makes sense. That is what the internet is, just a way to distribute information.
And storing information is getting cheaper and cheaper. So, these cloud environments, Google, Amazon, databases like Snowflake, even Oracle now, mass quantities of storage. And this is Gordon Moore's law from Intel for the last 40 years, right? So in the conceptual sense, it's more of the same, but it's not more of the same because the ability to just store the amount of data that Some of it's trivial, some of it's going to be useless, but it doesn't matter until the data scientists and ultimately the AI algorithms figure out where the anomalies are in the data. We can't separate useless from useful necessarily, right? That's the whole idea of a data scientist and why they're paid 300K coming out of college today. You can see that as an ongoing developed thing. But it is, as we are probably getting close to running out of time here, I did want to make the point that though we're talking a lot of futuristic stuff here, it's humbling to me, a little surprising to me, but it certainly keeps clean data rolling along, right? How many organizations, as we talk as if the future is right around the corner, are still dealing very much with yesterday's problems, right? So getting access to data, getting it loaded, getting it modeled, putting it in a form where I can understand it. Oh, I've got an acquisition, so there's 3 new sources that have to be loaded. This is a big problem. How are we gonna load that data? The IT department said it's going to take 6 months. Why does it take 6 months? This is yesterday's problems that persist, and I don't see them go unless you're really in a forward-looking, big invested company, Google being a good example. But if you're in a business that's making rubber O-rings or distributing some kind of parts for airplanes or whatever, yeah, there's a lot of yesterday that we're still hanging on to that has to be done. So as they call me and say, help me with my AI strategy, shit, we got to get your data strategy sorted out. There's no such thing as AI without meaningful data, unless it's all going to come from the outside world, right? Everything coming from inside your company has to be available. It has to be of enough quality that we can trust it. It has to be understood in terms of where it came from, what's typically called data lineage in my business, right? So where did that piece of data come from when sales and marketing are having an argument at the executive table about a particular piece of data? No, I say blue. No, you say red. Where did you get the data? Where the hell did it come from? So this is an age-old problem, and to the extent things like machine learning can accelerate our ability to, my favorite phrase, bend the future. That only works if you've got your data in a place that enables that. So, that's the pull. There's a push to the future, but there's a pull from the past that I think is pretty profound.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that there is so much opportunity for marketing technology in the future to fix some of that data stuff. Just like the idea that marketing is so complex that you need this massive team to connect data systems and it's all extremely customized. It's just ripe for disruption. The tools are all there, the strategies are all there, but somehow it's all manual. And I think the market will address that in the next few years.
Yeah, hope so. That's for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been a really great conversation, and I really like it. I think that there's a sort of dystopian element to it, and that's great because it's a different flavor of an episode, and I think the listeners are really going to like it. If you're listening, I really hope you enjoyed it, and thank you, Mark, again for joining. This has been such a great conversation.
Cheers, Alex. Bye-bye.